And actually, you know what? For everybody out there who's a parent, check out the laws in your state, because what we discovered was that in Florida, there is a program that allows any high school student to take college courses at state universities for free.
Welcome, everyone, to the podcast. As we near the end of the spring season with the promise of summer just around the corner, many of us start dreaming about the great outdoors and perhaps a life less ordinary. Today, we're talking to someone who not just dreamed it, but lived it. Our guest, Dave Foster, turned his fantasy of living on a sailboat with his family into a reality, and he did it by mastering some of the most efficient tax strategies out there. And we're going to talk about that today. Dave is a founder and CEO of the 1031 Investor and an Amazon bestselling author. Today, he's here not only to share valuable insights from his book, but also to take us through his personal journey of using the 1031 exchange to fulfill his dream of life at sea with his family. Welcome, Dave.
Hey, thanks so much. It brings a smile because those were great days. Although there's two people out there, two types of people. There are those who have been seasick and those who lie about it. So still the good days outweigh the bad for sure. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have you. And when I saw your story, I was like, this is a very compelling, interesting story because honestly, right now, I would love to be on a boat at sea, just like you were. And you told me before we started that you were doing that. And you raised your kids in the boat, but then you recently sold the boat, and now you're on the mainland. Is that right?
Yeah, life is very fleeting, isn't it? And it
Yeah.
comes and goes. And, I think what we learned was that as our children got bigger and they start to spread their wings, it was really more important for us to be in a position where we could be close to them. And so the boat no longer fit the mold. But boy, are we glad that we grabbed that when we did. And I think that's the message that I give to everybody is if there's something that's in your dream list, do it now, do it sooner, because you don't know if you'll be able to tomorrow, and life
Yeah.
changes.
That's absolutely true. That's a great message. Maybe tell us about this because I certainly want to talk about these tax efficiencies, but really this story is so interesting to me, so fascinating. So how did the process get started, and I'm really interested to hear how your life unfolded on the boat as well.
Yeah, it's actually our story of how we were able to do it using the tax strategies just intertwines so well with why and the reasons behind that. My wife and I were, and I guess you got to understand, Robbie, first of all, I'm a Kansas farm boy.
Yeah.
My wife is a Minneapolis city girl, and we were living in Denver, Colorado. The one non common denominator, there's no ocean anywhere. So,
Right.
how in the world did that happen?
Yeah.
We had our first child, and it was just amazing. That changed everything because we threw away the TV. We said, oh my gosh, all we want to do is just look at this little creature that God's given us and do nothing but just do and awe. And we realized at that moment that the greatest commodity that anybody has is not money, wealth, position, or power. It's time. And you cannot get more time. You can only use time more wisely. And we said, that's what we want to do because we want to spend that time with our children. So we started searching for how can we get off the corporate train here to do that.
And what were
And
you doing? What kind of work were you doing at the time?
I was in real estate development
Okay.
and I was a cabinet level official at a university.
You
And
were,
my
you were
wife
what?
was,
Say that again. I missed that.
I was a cabinet level official at a university
Okay. Okay.
and I was doing real estate development.
Okay.
My wife was an international air cargo, flying everywhere around the world. I mean, time was not something we had a lot of,
Right.
and we wanted to find it. But we went to the wedding of a friend, and I'll remember this as long as I live in Ventura, California. And someone we met at the wedding had a sailboat. Never been on a sailboat, a
Right.
tractor, but not a sailboat. And they took us out of Ventura at sunset. And it wasn't, we went towards the sun and then we came back in, and my wife looked at me and said, This is how we're going to retire. I said, okay, here we go. And at that point, someone said, but we still have to have money to do this. And that's when someone yelled, let's become real estate investors. It'll be easy. And that's how we got started. Up from having never sailed to deciding that that was the thing for us. As you start to see, Ravi, one of my other nicknames is Ready, Fire, Aim Dave. You know, I get a
Yeah.
plan, we just start doing it. And
Yeah.
so that was literally the impetus behind it, was to spend more time with our family. And we just got hooked on life on the water.
So you okay. So you had this experience. You made up your mind at that point that, hey, this is where I see myself in the future. And were you just focused on that? Was that like, were you doing everything in terms of investing and in real estate, et cetera, to get to that point? Was that your ultimate
Oh
goal?
yeah. I mean, we'd set goals, then we set sub goals, and ours was 10 years. And we took coupon clipping to an extreme, everything that you do to
Yeah.
try and become obsessed with reaching your goal. But we knew that this whole idea of buying a boat, being able to fund a lifestyle on it, was not going to be cheap. And it wasn't something that you could just get to by coupon clipping.
Right.
So I said, okay, here's the real estate. Let's do it. I bought a duplex in Denver. I fixed it up. I rented it. I sold it. I made a bunch of money. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Till I went to my accountant at the end of the year. And he said, hey, you got to write a $30,000 check for the taxes on this. Well, that didn't feel very good.
Right.
And that was going to put the goal back quite a bit when you realize that you have a partner named Uncle Sam. And he's always going to get his money first. So we had to rethink some things. And one of the things that I've always, we've all heard the adage, and I'm sure you've said it before too, that you make money in real estate when you buy it, right? You get obsessed with finding the deals, buying it just right, because that guarantees your exit.
Right.
The problem is there's another corollary that people forget. And that is that what determines the success is not just how you buy it, but the amount you have left after you sell it. And that's when I discovered the 1031 exchange, because that allows real estate investors to sell investment real estate, purchase new investment real estate, and not have to pay the tax in the middle. And
Right.
that just reinvigorated every goal we had, so that
Okay.
we were able in 10 years to make it work.
So, okay. So you initially started with a duplex, you sold it, had to pay taxes on it, you learned your lesson. Then you moved on to what types of assets?
Well, we stayed in primarily residential at that point because that was what we knew. That was where we could scale. So we bought single family rentals. And along the way, so we're doing every time we sell one, we're doing a 1031 exchange, because
Okay.
then we get to keep the tax dollars
Right.
and we get to use them to invest to buy more real estate. So
Yeah.
we were really compounding our portfolio very quickly. But at the exact same time, we were also periodically selling the house we lived in, because that fell under a different statute, Section 121, which is the primary residence, where if you lived in a property for 2 out of the previous 5 years, you get to sell it. And as a married couple, the first $500,000 in profit is tax free. You could do that once every 2 years. Well, I mean, that is the single greatest gift that the government's ever going to give you. Buy a house, live in it, sell it tax free.
Yeah.
So we combined the two statutes. And every time we sold a primary residence, the tax free money went into the buy the boat fund. Every time we sold an investment property, that money went to buy additional revenue producing properties, so that we moved our portfolio from Colorado to Connecticut to Florida. And 10 years to the day of setting the goal, we're able to buy a 53-foot sailboat with tax-free dollars from all of our primary residence sales and live on it, raise our children on it for 10 years, living off the income from our vacation rental portfolio.
Wow. Well, okay, this is amazing. So I understand the part where you're 1031ing into different investment properties. That makes sense. And I do understand, you know, the primary resident part where you're selling you're keeping those funds, and I imagine you're upgrading slightly every time you move to a new residence. But how do you go from that to a boat? Like how can you 1031 into a boat?
No, you can't, which
Okay.
was why we had to use the tax-free dollars from
Huh.
our primary residence sales.
I see.
And that's
Okay.
what funded the boat.
Okay.
There's another little hack in here that very few people know about. And that is that what we also did was periodically, instead of buying a new primary residence, we would convert one of our investment properties from investment into our next primary residence. So the deferred tax from the 1031 exchange was still in that property.
Okay.
But when we converted it into our primary residence, then once we lived in it for 2 years, we were able to take at that point, you could take all of the gain tax free.
Oh wow.
So we were periodically converting tax deferred into tax free.
I
And
didn't know
that
you could
really
do that.
juiced up the portfolio there.
So you can 1031 into various residential properties, live in one of them, and after 2 years take up to, you said $200,000
That was the old rule. Now they don't let you take it all.
Okay.
Now, matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that a picture of me got put in the lunchroom at the IRS because of this, but that's another story for another day. But here's the way the rule is now. Let's
Okay.
put this in the context for maybe some of your listeners
Sure.
who are nearing retirement. Maybe not retirement age, but they want to retire.
Right.
I want to get off the train.
Yeah.
So 1031 exchange, like one of my clients did, into three identical investment condos on St. Pete Beach. Same floor, everything.
Yeah.
Now he's renting them out as short term rentals. After he used one of them for a couple years, he had satisfied his investment intent. So he moved into it. Then he and his wife lived in it for 3 years. Now, the way the IRS rules read now is that in order to sell it and get part of the money tax free, you must have owned it for 5 years, which he did. You must have lived in it for at least 2 out of the previous 5. In his first sale, he lived in it for 3 out of 5. So he was then able to sell and take 60% or 3/5 of the gain tax free. You had to
Okay.
pay tax on the rest. Okay. But in any kind of a retirement gig, we would expect to pay tax on investments or delivering pizzas or whatever it is that we're doing, right?
Right.
Where do you think he moved?
To his next condo.
Exactly. Exactly.
And what
And
did
then the
he
clock started ticking there.
and so okay, so he moved to his next condo, same type of thing, lived in there for you have to live in there for a minimum of 5 years then.
You have to live in it for a minimum of two
2 years. Two
out of
years.
the 5 years before selling it. You
Got
have
it.
to have
Own
owned
it.
it for at least 5 years.
Okay. So he's owned all these for that amount of time. He lives there for 2, and then he sells it, and then he only can take a percentage of that as tax free
Correct.
because he's not there for the full 5 years. Is that the reason why?
That is correct because it's
Okay.
a property that was used part of the time for rental, part of the time is his primary residence.
Okay. So for example, say let's just say a round numbers, $100,000 of profit after living there for 2 years, owning it for 5. How much could be taken as in terms of tax? How much is not taxed?
So in that case, if he lived in it for 2 and then it was rented for 3, total of
Right.
5,
Right.
he would get 40% of the gain
40,000.
tax
Okay.
free.
Okay.
$40,000 tax free.
Okay. Okay.
Now, if he lived in it for 8 years, like it was a great house, you love it, you
Yeah.
live in it for 8 out of 10, then you get 80% of the gain
Okay.
tax free.
Got it. Okay. So that's a very interesting strategy. So that's another strategy that someone can use who's willing to move, relatively frequently, which, before kids it was easier, but when you have kids, it's a lot harder to get up and move like that. But if you're willing to do it for the goals that you have, and I think I really want to underscore what you did there because that's vitally important is people don't really have goals necessarily when they're thinking about retirement. They're like, I just don't want to work so hard anymore. I maybe want to cut down hours, but that in and of itself is not a is not a tangible goal. Your goal was, look, I want to live on this boat. This is how much it costs. This is when I'm going to do it. And the more detailed, the more granular you make that goal, the easier it is to achieve it, the easier it is to create a timeline to help facilitate achieving it. And by using these tax deferred or tax-free strategies, you're able to get to that point.
Yeah, and the easier it is for you to mark progress. I cannot tell you how important it was for me. And I don't think I'm different from anybody else, but I get discouraged. The Bible says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. And it's great to set goals, but if you never see progress, you get depressed. You start getting tempted to cheat on it, to not worry about it. But it's that little bits of encouragement you can get along the way. Watching a bank account grow. We took periodic trips to learn how to sail when we reached certain milestones. Whatever you can do to reward yourself in a way that doesn't hinder you from further getting to your goal, you need to take those opportunities. Life is to be savored,
Yeah.
and you can't just defer the goal and then get it and go, that's great. It's like the guy I read about today, 32 years old, retired early, went back to work because his whole goal was, I just don't want to work.
Yeah.
And what he realized very quickly was, well, that wasn't a very good goal.
Yeah.
That in fact, there's a lot of fulfillment that I can get. Like you and I talking about, what you're doing, your desire to help people, to have people view health in a different way. These are all things that we can derive so much satisfaction. For me, it was watching my children grow and learning how to spear lobster and seeing sunsets and watching them navigate a big boat into the harbor. Those are the kind of things that give us joy.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now, what if someone doesn't have the appetite to buy their own rental property? They want to invest in multifamily. So, this is Viking is a multifamily syndicate. So people often invest with us with the idea that they want to continue to grow their investment tax free. So how would they do that? Could they do the 1031s that way?
There is a way to do that. The 1031 exchange will allow you to continue to defer your gain into any other sector. So it can be from any type of real estate to any other type. We went through the whole mold ourselves, went from single family to multifamily, commercial, raw land development, passive opportunities like you're talking about. The 1031 can accommodate all of that while keeping the tax deferred. And the 1031 can accommodate wherever you're at in your personal journey. Is it time to start being passive? Or is it maybe like a client who is maybe a medical professional who just doesn't have the time and whose valuable time must be spent on their practice, but they want to invest in real estate? So these passive opportunities are so key. And the answer is absolutely the 1031 can work. Now, the problem is that the 1031 exchange has to be a sale of real estate followed by a purchase of actual real estate. It doesn't have to be the whole piece, but they do have to take title to some of the real estate itself. So the problem with many of these syndications are that when you buy into them, you're not buying real estate. So you can't use them as a replacement property for your 1031 exchange because what you're buying is a membership interest in a company that owns real estate. Now, some syndicators are not like that. And I think you guys probably have some as well, don't you, that you can do tenants in common on?
Yes, yes. So we do accept ticks or tenants in common, where just as you mentioned, people can invest their 1031 money into one of our deals, and that's also tax deferred, and that's a separate structure that we help set up.
Yeah, that's a great when you've got the opportunity to be able to do that, that's phenomenal for people because not only does it let them use a 1031 exchange to get into that because they're buying a part of the real estate itself. But when you guys sell a project, they sell their real estate at the same time, obviously.
Right.
They could do another 1031 exchange and they
Yes.
could go buy something totally different. Or maybe you guys have another project that they could 1031 into as well. So the opportunities are great when the structure will accommodate that. And that's probably the biggest way that we see people get into syndications is through the tenants in common structure.
Now, you always hear when you hear about 1031s, you hear like kind exchange. And you mentioned that you can transfer that money into any type of real estate, multifamily, then maybe back to residential, etc. So what does that mean exactly, like kind exchange?
Yeah, it's a funny little phrase that just came out of some tax code somewhere, like kind. And the other phrase that goes along with it is qualified use. Like kind simply means that it's real estate, that it's
Okay.
not a plane, it's not an interest in a company that owns real estate, it's actual real estate. Qualified use means that it is real estate that's held for investment. So the types of real estate that don't qualify, your primary residence, or real estate that you buy specifically to resell. Fix and flippers can't do 1031 exchanges. The intent has to be long term. But other than that, any type of real estate, as long as it's used for investment.
Now you said the intent has to be long term. Is there a minimum amount of time you have to own?
They don't make it that easy for us, unfortunately. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's no statutory holding period. The IRS hinges everything on that word intent and how you can demonstrate that. Now, the vast majority of people feel that anything more than a year is perfectly fine to demonstrate your intent. But there could always be reasons why your intent was to hold, but maybe you sold much sooner than a year. Like the client that I had in Tennessee sold his property after 90 days and he wanted to do a 1031 exchange. I said, well, seems to me like you were just buying this to resell it. He said, no, no, no. It's the bear. A bear had moved into residency at the trash can and the tenant left because they did not want to deal with a bear. And he did not want to deal with a bear, so he sold the property. And he did promise me that he and his accountant were saving the ring of photographs that showed the bear at the front door in
So
case the
so that
IRS
means
ever.
that so basically he's CYing. So if he were to get audited, he could just say, "Hey, look, this is the reason I've
Yeah.
got pictures to prove it," and et cetera, et cetera. Then he's fine.
Yeah. My intent was to hold. Something caused me to change that.
Okay. Okay. Now you shared with us some really interesting tips on 1031s, tax-free transactions. What about actually two questions? One, any additional tips that you think would be helpful for our audience? But then two, you hear this phrase "swap till you drop." If you can explain that as well.
Yeah, I love that phrase. The four biggest benefits of the 1031 exchange. The first one is first that you get to defer the tax and use it for your benefit. The second one is that you can use it to keep that tax deferred while you move into any other type of real estate investing anywhere else in the country. So you can take advantage of emerging markets, changing from cash flow to appreciation, types of real estate, et cetera, et cetera. The third big benefit and leg of the 1031 exchange is that you can meet wherever your personal journey is. You mentioned kids a little bit ago, and we did this as well. As our children, before we got on the boat, we knew we wanted to be making memories. So we started buying vacation rentals that we could generate income off of, but also that we could go and enjoy and build memories with our kids. So those are the three legs of the swap mentality. Swap till you drop brings in the fourth D, which is die. Because there's a distinct wow, I have a hard time even saying this. There's a distinct advantage to dying if you're a 1031 investor. How's that for a backhanded compliment? When you pass away, your heirs inherit your real estate at what is called a stepped up basis. So they inherit it as if they paid market value for it on the day you died. All of that deferred tax over all the years you don't pay, Your estate doesn't pay, your heirs don't pay. So if you literally swap until you drop, you will leave a tax-free legacy to your heirs, and they can start their own journey without any tax
Yeah,
due at the
that's
beginning.
amazing. And when I first learned that, I was so surprised, and I was like, wow, this is a real an incredible, hidden gem here that Uncle Sam offers us to pass on our legacy to our kids. And that's if you're listening to this in the with the idea that you want to invest for your kids, this is the perfect way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's of course it's always fun because then they get to choose what they're going to do with the real estate. And honestly, I'm pretty sure that this might have been some of the nefarious impetus in my second child deciding to go to med school. They may just be trying to figure out how they can pull the plug.
Right. Is your second one going into hospice medicine? Because then that would certainly be.
Oh my gosh, yeah, I'd move away and I wouldn't give
Yeah,
them my phone
right.
number.
The last question I have before I want to hear more about your boat story is cash flow generated when you do a 1031? Because some people, I'm just going to frame this and then I'll ask you the question. Some people don't understand what this what the power of this really is. Imagine you had a large amount of money. Let's say it's $1 million. You 1031 that million instead of just selling that asset and paying taxes for it. It's a potential 40, almost 50% savings in tax. So it's $500,000. If you take that, take it out and pay it, that's what you have left. But if you take that million and 1031 into an asset that's generating cash flow, then you're getting cash flow on that $1 million, and it's a tremendous amount more than you would if you just sold it. So there's a just a huge there's a lot of power here in 1031ing. But I want to ask you, this question is, the cash flow generated, how's that treated tax wise?
So the regular cash flow from a property becomes just like regular income to you. Now, but again, real estate, the best investment ever, because you're going to bring in income from your real estate that is offset by expenses. It's offset by the interest on the mortgage that you pay, but part of that your tenants are paying actually. But also part of that mortgage payment is what's called the amortization of the loan or repayment of the capital of that loan. So over the period of time, your tenants are paying the loan off for you. And that's one of the components of the calculation called the internal rate of return, which adds up all of the different ways we make money. We make money off of cash flow, which nets out of expenses. We make money from appreciation of the real estate. We make money from depreciation. Now, this is the huge one. Depreciation is a pretend game where the IRS lets you pretend that your real estate loses value every year. And they give you a tax break for that. And that tax break further offsets your income. So that in general, with folks who are going in particular into syndications or Delaware statutory trusts, and in particular where you're doing any kind of soft cost segregation studies or taking bonus depreciation, the tax write-off of depreciation will totally offset the income that comes in. It becomes tax-free income. Now, when you sell your property, the IRS does a nasty and they make you pay it back, but not if you 1031 it.
Right.
So you can take those tax write-offs and use them all your life, never have to pay them back. And then what do we do at the end? We go to that great sailboat in the sky and nobody pays that tax.
Yeah.
So it really is. And I'm sure you've probably seen this in some of your projects where the income from the project is pretty much offset by the
Yes.
depreciation
Oh yeah.
allowances.
Yeah. On all of our projects, that's the case. Wow, this is great. This is great information. Before we end, I just want to hear more about your story. So 10 years, you got the sailboat, you took your kids. How are you able to school them? What was life like on the sailboat? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we homeschooled all of our kids.
Okay.
And so
Now,
that
how
was
many
great to
kids? How
start.
many kids do you have?
Four.
Four. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We had four children. and we homeschooled them. And of course, mom was the principal, dad was the superintendent until they reached 14. And actually, you know what? For everybody out there who's a parent, check out the laws in your state, because what we discovered was that in Florida, there is a program that allows any high school student to take college courses at state universities for free. All they have to do is pass the college entrance exam. So when our kids turned 14, because we were homeschooling, instead of creating this massive homeschool curriculum, we simply got them enrolled in college, and their college classes became their curriculum for homeschool. So that by the time they were all 18, they already had their Associates of Arts degree for
Wow.
free. And
Wow.
I think most states will let you do this. The reason why people don't know about it is kids get caught into public school or the normal school system,
Right.
and they're just overprogrammed. They don't have the time. We cut through all that and said, if we're going to take algebra, we're going to take algebra at State College of Florida. We're not
Right.
going to take it through a high school homeschool program.
Yeah.
So
So
that was a huge
they would do an
benefit myself.
online they would do an online course
We
then?
did online, and a couple times we stayed for a semester so that they could do and seat. We learned real quickly, though, that that could become a problem because my two oldest boys were 18 months apart. And we actually put them into the same class one time. And so they're in there, and one of them did not turn in an assignment. And the teacher asked him, "Why did you turn this in?" And I think his response was something like, "Oh, we had to leave town or we had to go do something." To which his younger brother just yelled across the room, "What are you talking about, Gunner? We didn't go anywhere." So we learned that we kind of need to separate them a little bit.
So you would sail to various locations, you'd stay in certain places for several weeks, you'd move on to others. Was that what you did?
Yeah, we were really not everybody's like this, right? There are people that enjoy the activity of sailing. They want to
Right.
see horizons, cross oceans. For us, the draw was community. We
Okay.
loved to go places and then fit into the community. So we were in Key West for a while, the Bahamas for a while, up in the Everglades, east and west coast of Florida, where we could enfold into community
I
and
see.
get to see the rich fabric and be a part of others' lives.
That's really cool. That's amazing. And then your kids all were homeschooled till they got to what, the age of 14, you said, and then took
Yeah,
college
well, then
courses
we
and
still homeschooled them, but it was
uh,
college classes.
okay.
And of course, then time goes on, and they decide they want to go to school here and school there. And
Yeah.
mom and dad are saying, "Yeah, it was a great adventure. It's time to sell the boat," because I think mama's feeling grandkids, and she wants to make sure she's close.
Did they have any problems socializing at all during this period?
None whatsoever. As a matter of fact, that's a very common fear that people have. And we say, well, what do you mean? We ought to ask them, what do you mean? Do they have problems socializing? Do you mean, do they have problems not acting like normal junior high and high schoolers? Because most of their interactions were with adults.
Right.
So they learned how to be functioning, socialized adults as opposed to this. So we skipped a little bit of the immature.
Right.
Not all, of course, which is why God made dinghies, because the best thing we could do for timeouts was we would just tow the dinghy off the back of the boat and throw them in it and say, "That's it. You can come back on board when we feel like it."
That's amazing. I mean, a lot of us also, that have kids that want to introduce them to new experiences, think about taking them to other places, not just on a boat would be amazing, but also on to other countries and maybe sort of like a semester abroad type of thing. But and in fact, I was thinking about that as well. But in the back of my mind, it's always like, hey, how will they make friends? Will they, be able to socialize with the other kids? And maybe they're going to speak another language there, how that affect things. But, it's just like life's an adventure. Just give it a shot. Just try it out.
Yeah, I think my advice for that would be do it sooner rather than later, because as your kids are growing up, there's a period of time where everything is about the nuclear family. And so their experience is simply going to be an offshoot of what the family experience is.
Yeah.
I've seen people get into have more issues where they have their children have reached that point, 13, 14, 15,
Yeah.
where the focus becomes more outside
I see.
the
Yeah.
nuclear family. And when you start pulling kids out of that, it can be a little more difficult.
Yeah.
Our kids love it. They still love, they call themselves boat kids.
Yeah.
They had a ball and they never had a bit of problem making friends.
That's awesome. I love that. Well, Dave, this was amazing. I appreciate your time. If someone wants to get in touch with you or learn more about you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I would say go right to our website. We've designed it with education in mind. So there's a YouTube channel that's got all sorts of short strategies. We've got access to my book, The Lifetime Tax-Free Wealth, the Real Estate Investor's Guide to the 1031 Exchange. And in that book, I devote a huge chunk of it to case studies where we actually dissect what actual clients have done to structure their lives around using the 1031 exchange. So, but you can find us at the1031investor.com.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And certainly we will have you back at some point to talk more about 1031 exchanges and tax efficiency.
Sounds awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
If you like this podcast, please hit subscribe or a thumbs up, and we'll see you next time.